Under scattered Auspex returns and degraded picked captures recovered from multiple Forge worlds, a recurring mechanical silhouette appears with unusual consistency. The machine is most often recorded at the edge of armoured formations or operating independently across open terrain, its gait fast enough to distort range estimates and its acoustic signature described as a rapid, metallic percussion rather than the steady rumble associated with tracked vehicles. Several early records misclassified the construct as a light walker or experimental servitor platform, though later cross-referencing corrected this assumption. The earliest compiled data fragments originate from Mechanicus exploratory logs, battlefield recovery reports, and post-action assessments filed by the Adeptus Administratum, most of which focus on performance metrics rather than provenance. Recovered picked feeds show a tall, bipedal war engine with elongated limbs and an elevated weapons mount, often partially obscured by dust plumes or thermal distortion. In several cases, witnesses noted that the machine appeared to accelerate beyond what its mass should reasonably allow, maintaining pursuit across terrain normally considered unsuitable for sustained mechanical locomotion. Audio logs taken from nearby infantry units describe a persistent high-frequency whine coinciding with its movement, suggesting an internal power system under constant load rather than cyclical output. Despite extensive exposure to hostile fire, damage reports indicate a surprising level of operational continuity, with the machine continuing to function after suffering impacts that would disable comparable platforms. Attempts to trace the machine's developmental lineage through conventional production records yield limited results. Many data trails terminate abruptly within sealed Mechanicus archives or fragment into incompatible formats attributed to divergent Forge World record-keeping standards. Where documentation does survive, it frequently references an incomplete standard template construct pattern, annotated with marginal notes, warning against modification or replication beyond approved parameters. These early records do not name the machine directly, instead referring to it through serial designations and function descriptors. Only later compilations consolidate these references under a single designation, formally identifying the subject as the Ironstrider Ballistarius. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is a product of the Adeptus Mechanicus, developed as part of a broader initiative to field highly mobile, long-range fire support platforms capable of operating alongside Skitarii maniples. Its origins are inseparable from the fragmented technological inheritance of the Mechanicus, particularly the reliance on incomplete standard template construct data recovered during the Great Crusade and subsequent millennia. According to surviving Martian archives, the core design principles of the Ironstrider trace back to a partial standard template construct pattern recovered from a long-lost exploratory fleet. The recovered data was incomplete, lacking full schematics for its power generation system and several internal subsystems, yet it was deemed sufficiently intact to warrant controlled reconstruction. The reconstruction process was overseen by senior Magi of Mars, who interpreted the surviving data through a combination of empirical testing, doctrinal inference, and ritualized machine communion. The resulting design preserved the external locomotion architecture described in the standard template construct, most notably the elongated digitigrade legs optimized for speed and stability across uneven ground. However, the internal power system remained only partially understood. Mechanicus records acknowledge that the machine's energy source does not conform to standard reactor classifications, nor does it exhibit the maintenance cycles typical of plasma or promethium-based systems. This anomaly is noted repeatedly in technical annotations, often accompanied by invocations of caution and reverence. Construction of the Ironstrider Ballistarius is centralized around major Forge worlds, with Mars retaining ultimate authority over pattern sanctification and distribution. Each unit is assembled through a combination of automated fabrication and manual write-based processes, the latter intended to ensure machine spirit compliance. The chassis is fabricated from layered ceramite and plasteel composites, selected to balance durability with weight reduction. Internal frameworks incorporate shock dampening assemblies designed to absorb the stresses generated by sustained high-speed locomotion. The legs, each consisting of multiple articulated segments, are reinforced at key stress points to prevent catastrophic failure during rapid acceleration or abrupt directional changes. The power source of the Ironstrider Ballistarius remains one of its most distinctive and controversial features. Mechanicus doctrine officially classifies the system as a sealed motive engine of unknown origin, recovered as part of the incomplete standard template construct data. Unlike conventional engines, it exhibits no measurable fuel consumption over operational timescales. Field reports consistently note that Ironstriders remain active for extended campaigns without refueling or reactor cycling, a characteristic that has led to widespread speculation within the Mechanicus hierarchy. Some magi have suggested that the system functions as a form of self-sustaining kinetic conversion engine, while others argue that it represents a lost Archeotech design whose principles are no longer comprehensible. Despite these uncertainties, the Mechanicus enforces strict prohibitions against disassembly of the power unit beyond surface-level maintenance. Historical precedent supports this caution. Early experimental attempts to access the internal workings of the engine reportedly resulted in catastrophic failures, including total machine loss and, in several recorded instances, lethal feedback effects on attending tech priests. As a result, the power system is treated as a sanctified black box. Maintenance rights focus on external calibration, lubrication of moving parts, and the recitation of appeasement protocols intended to maintain machine-spirit harmony. The decision to deploy such a poorly understood system reflects the broader technological philosophy of the Adeptus Mechanicus, which prioritizes preservation and utilization of ancient designs over innovation. The Ironstrider Ballistarius embodies this approach, functioning as both a weapon of war and a relic of a lost technological epoch. Its continued production is justified not through complete understanding, but through demonstrable battlefield effectiveness and adherence to established ritual protocols. From a developmental standpoint, the Ironstrider represents an evolution of Mechanicus Walker concepts rather than a direct descendant of earlier Imperial designs. Its emphasis on speed over armor marks a departure from traditional Walker platforms, which typically prioritize resilience and firepower. This design philosophy aligns with the operational doctrine of the Skitarii, whose role emphasizes rapid engagement, precision fire, and coordinated maneuvers directed by noospheric command structures. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is optimized to integrate seamlessly into these formations, responding to data bursts and targeting directives with minimal latency. In terms of physical scale, the Ironstrider stands significantly taller than an unaugmented human, its elevated weapons platform allowing clear lines of fire over intervening terrain and infantry units. The cockpit, if such it can be called, is not designed for comfort or extended habitation. The pilot, a Skitarii of appropriate neural conditioning, is hardwired into the control systems through a combination of data cables and neural interfaces. This integration reduces reaction time and allows the pilot to interpret sensor data as direct sensory input, effectively merging human cognition with machine processing. The origins of this pilot integration system are documented with greater clarity than the power source itself. Mechanicus archives trace its development to long-established Skitarii control doctrines, refined over millennia of warfare. The Ironstrider's control architecture emphasizes direct neural command, minimizing intermediary systems that could introduce delay or error. While this approach places significant strain on the pilot, Skitarii conditioning and cybernetic augmentation mitigate these effects, enabling sustained operation under combat conditions. The Ironstrider Ballistarius entered wider service during the later millennia of the Imperium, following extensive field trials conducted under controlled combat simulations and limited live engagements. Initial deployment reports highlight its effectiveness in open environments where its speed and maneuverability could be fully exploited. Administratum records from these early campaigns frequently note discrepancies between expected and observed performance, particularly in relation to endurance and mechanical reliability. These discrepancies are consistently resolved in favor of the Ironstrider, reinforcing confidence in the platform despite unresolved technical questions. Over time, the Ironstrider became a standardized element of Skitarii forces, its presence on the battlefield serving as both a tactical asset and a symbol of Mechanicus' technological authority. Its continued use underscores the Imperium's reliance on ancient designs whose full significance has long since been obscured by the passage of time and the erosion of knowledge. In this context, the Ironstrider Ballistarius is less a product of contemporary engineering than a preserved fragment of humanity's lost technological heritage, repurposed for endless war. By the end of its formal adoption period, the Ironstrider Ballistarius had secured its place within the Mechanicus arsenal, not through innovation or refinement, but through faithful replication of a partially understood design. Its origins, construction methods, and enigmatic power source collectively illustrate the paradox at the heart of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a civilization capable of producing advanced war machines while remaining fundamentally disconnected from the principles that enable their existence. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is defined less by mass or armor thickness, and more by a carefully optimized balance between mobility, stability, and precision firepower. Its overall design reflects a deliberate rejection of conventional Imperial Walker priorities, favoring speed and continuous operational output over passive protection. This design philosophy is evident in every measurable specification, recorded by the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Adeptus Administratum, both of which classify the platform as a high-mobility fire support engine rather than a frontline assault unit. In terms of physical dimensions, the Ironstrider Ballistarius stands at a height exceeding 3 times that of an unaugmented human, measured from ground contact point to the apex of its elevated weapon mount. Its elongated leg assemblies account for the majority of this height, raising the chassis and weapons platform well above infantry formations and low-terrain obstructions. The overall mass of the machine is comparatively low for a walker of its size, achieved through extensive use of plasteel alloys and ceramite composites, arranged in layered configurations rather than monolithic armor plates. Administratum logistics data places its weight significantly below that of tracked armored vehicles with equivalent weapon systems, a factor that directly contributes to its exceptional speed. The leg structure of the Ironstrider Ballistarius is among its most distinctive features. Each leg is composed of multiple articulated segments connected through reinforced rotary joints and hydraulic actuators. These joints are designed to operate continuously at high stress levels, allowing rapid stride cycling without mechanical fatigue. Shock absorption systems integrated into the lower segments dissipate kinetic forces generated during acceleration and deceleration, reducing stress transfer to the central chassis. This allows the Ironstrider to maintain stability even while firing heavy weapons on the move, a capability that is not universally shared among Imperial Walker platforms. Speed is the defining performance characteristic of the Ironstrider Ballistarius. Mechanicus field trials consistently record sustained ground speeds that exceed those of most Imperial armoured vehicles, including light reconnaissance tanks. Unlike tracked vehicles, which experience efficiency losses over broken terrain, the Ironstrider maintains near optimal performance across a wide range of environments. Loose soil, rubble fields, ash wastes, and shallow water crossings present minimal impediment to its movement. Administratum combat logs frequently note Ironstriders outpacing both friendly and enemy units during rapid redeployments, allowing them to reposition with minimal advance warning. Acceleration metrics further distinguish the platform from comparable systems. The Ironstrider is capable of reaching peak operational speed within a remarkably short distance, a result of its continuous output power system and low inertial resistance. This allows it to perform rapid flanking maneuvers and sudden changes in engagement distance, complicating enemy targeting solutions. The absence of a traditional fuel-based engine cycle means there is no delay associated with throttle response or power ramp-up, contributing to the perception among witnesses that the machine moves with unnatural immediacy. Despite its speed, the Ironstrider Ballistarius is not fragile. While its armor coverage is limited compared to heavier walkers, critical systems are carefully protected through layered internal shielding and component redundancy. The frontal chassis incorporates reinforced plating designed to deflect small arms fire and shrapnel, while the leg assemblies are armoured at key structural points to prevent joint seizure or catastrophic collapse. Damage assessments indicate that Ironstriders can continue operating after sustaining multiple penetrations to non-critical areas, provided the power unit and neural control systems remain intact. Strength, in the conventional sense of lifting or ramming capability, is not the Ironstrider's primary role. However, its leg actuators generate sufficient force to traverse steep inclines, leap low obstacles, and maintain footing under recoil forces produced by its primary weapons. Mechanicus testing data shows that the platform can exert localized ground pressure comparable to medium vehicles, distributed across its footpads to prevent sinking in unstable terrain. This allows it to operate in environments where heavier units would become immobilized. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is equipped with a fixed forward-mounted heavy weapon system, mounted atop the central chassis between the leg assemblies. This elevated position provides a wide field of fire and minimizes interference from terrain features. The most common configuration utilizes a twin-linked Cognis cannon, selected for its long-range anti-armor capability and high penetration on characteristics. These weapons are directly integrated into the Ironstrider's targeting systems, allowing real-time data exchange between weapon optics, Auspex sensors, and the pilot's neural interface. The Cognis cannon configuration emphasizes precision and sustained fire rather than rapid saturation. Each weapon is stabilized through gyro mounts and recoil dampening systems, enabling accurate fire even while the platform is in motion. Power draw from the Ironstrider's internal engine allows continuous firing without the limitations imposed by external ammunition supplies, though thermal management systems regulate output to prevent weapon degradation. Field reports consistently highlight the platform's ability to engage enemy armor at ranges exceeding those of standard Imperial infantry heavy weapons. Alternative weapon configurations are documented, though less commonly deployed. These include the use of a twin-linked autocannon system, optimized for engaging light vehicles and massed infantry formations. In this configuration, the Ironstrider sacrifices some long-range penetration in exchange for increased rate of fire and versatility. The selection of weapon loadout is determined at the Forge World level based on anticipated deployment conditions and strategic requirements. Administratum supply records indicate that reconfiguration between weapon systems is possible, but requires specialized Mechanicus oversight. Secondary systems support the Ironstrider's primary combat role. Integrated Auspex arrays provide continuous scanning of the surrounding battlefield, feeding data directly into Skitarii command networks. These systems allow the Ironstrider to act as both a fire support unit and a mobile sensor platform, extending battlefield awareness for nearby forces. Environmental sensors monitor atmospheric composition, radiation levels and thermal signatures, enabling operation in hazardous zones without additional modification. The Ironstrider's targeting capabilities are enhanced by predictive algorithms derived from ancient Mechanicus data archives. These algorithms assist in target acquisition and lead calculation, particularly against fast-moving or evasive enemies. While not autonomous, the system reduces cognitive load on the pilot, allowing focus on tactical positioning and engagement prioritization. Administratum assessments note a statistically significant increase in hit probability when Ironstriders operate within established noospheric networks compared to isolated deployment. Defensive systems are minimal but purposeful. The Ironstrider lacks void shields or energy barriers, relying instead on speed and distance as its primary defenses. Smoke launchers and electronic countermeasure emitters are sometimes fitted, providing limited concealment or disruption of enemy targeting systems. These additions are not standardized and vary by Forge World doctrine. Mechanicus commentary emphasizes that the Ironstrider is not intended to absorb sustained enemy fire, but to avoid it through constant movement. Ammunition storage, where applicable, is internal and compact. For LAS-based systems, energy routing replaces physical ammunition feeds, simplifying logistics and reducing resupply requirements. Autocannon configurations include sealed ammunition hoppers, designed to minimize exposure and contamination. Reloading procedures are conducted by Mechanicus support units under controlled conditions, reinforcing the Ironstrider's dependence on dedicated logistical infrastructure. The integration of pilot and machine is central to the Ironstrider's combat effectiveness. Neural interfaces transmit movement commands and targeting data at speeds unattainable through manual controls. This allows precise coordination between locomotion and weapon discharge, enabling tactics such as firing while executing high-speed lateral movements. Skitarii pilots undergo extensive conditioning to withstand the sensory and cognitive demands of this interface, with failure rates during training remaining classified within Mechanicus archives. In combat scenarios, the Ironstrider's speed and firepower combine to create a distinctive fighting profile. Rather than advancing in formation, Ironstriders often operate on the flanks or ahead of main forces, engaging priority targets and withdrawing before enemy retaliation can be effectively organized. This hit and reposition approach aligns with Skitarii doctrines emphasizing data-driven engagement and force multiplication. Enemy reports frequently describe difficulty in tracking and targeting Ironstriders, attributing losses to their rapid movement and unexpected firing angles. The cumulative effect of these specifications is a war engine that defies traditional Imperial categorization. It is neither a scout vehicle nor a heavy assault platform, but a specialized instrument optimized for a specific tactical niche. Its speed allows it to dictate engagement terms, its weapons provide precision fire against high-value targets, and its endurance ensures sustained presence on the battlefield. These characteristics have secured the Ironstrider Ballistarius a permanent role within the Mechanicus arsenal, despite persistent uncertainties surrounding its deeper technological nature. By the standards of the Imperium, the Ironstrider Ballistarius represents an efficient convergence of ancient design and modern application. Its specifications reflect careful adherence to recovered Archeotech patterns, while its battlefield performance validates the Mechanicus decision to preserve and deploy a system that remains only partially understood. In this balance between capability and mystery, the Ironstrider continues to fulfill its intended function with relentless consistency, moving faster and striking farther than its appearance alone would suggest. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is inseparable from the individual who operates it, not in terms of personal identity, but through a deliberately engineered fusion of human cognition and machine execution. The pilot is not a commander in the traditional Imperial sense, nor merely a driver. Instead, the pilot functions as an integrated control node, translating tactical intent into immediate mechanical action through direct neural interface. This relationship defines both the operational purpose of the Ironstrider and the limits within which it can be employed. Pilots selected for Ironstrider duty are drawn exclusively from the ranks of the Skitarii, typically those already modified to support high-bandwidth neural interfacing. Administratum personnel records and Mechanicus personnel registries indicate that Ironstrider pilots are most commonly sourced from Ranger or Vanguard cohorts, chosen for their proven tolerance to sensory overload and prolonged machine linkage. Prior to assignment, candidates undergo additional cranial augmentation, including reinforced neural sockets, expanded data conduits, and redundancy implants designed to prevent catastrophic feedback in the event of interface instability. Physically, the pilot is heavily augmented even by Skitarii standards. Much of the original musculoskeletal system is reinforced or partially replaced, not to enhance strength in a conventional sense, but to ensure survivability under constant neural strain. The pilot's lower body is typically fixed into a rigid control harness within the Ironstrider's chassis, eliminating the need for traditional locomotion controls. Limbs that are no longer required for manual operation are often retained in reduced or vestigial form, preserved to maintain neurological stability rather than functional utility. Facial features are frequently obscured by rebreather units, optical augmetics, and data ports, rendering individual identity irrelevant in combat documentation. The integration process permanently alters the pilot's sensory experience. Visual input is no longer limited to organic sight, but augmented by Auspex overlays, range-finding reticles, threat prioritization markers, and predictive motion vectors. Auditory input is similarly filtered, with battlefield noise suppressed in favour of critical alerts and machine status indicators. Over time, the pilot's perception adapts to this environment, with reports indicating that many Ironstrider pilots experience difficulty reintegrating into non-interface states. Mechanicus psychological assessments describe a progressive dissociation from baseline human sensory norms, though this is not classified as a malfunction. Control of the Ironstrider is achieved through direct neural command rather than mechanical input. Movement commands are executed through intent recognition, allowing the machine to respond at speeds that bypass conscious muscular action. This results in an unusually fluid coordination between motion and weapon discharge. Administratum combat analyses note that Ironstriders frequently fire at optimal moments during stride transitions, exploiting brief windows of stabilized motion that would be nearly impossible to time manually. This capability is not the result of autonomous targeting, but of the pilot's neural synchronization with the machine's movement algorithms. Despite this integration, the Ironstrider is not autonomous. The pilot retains full responsibility for target selection, engagement authorization, and maneuver decisions. Higher-level tactical directives are transmitted through noospheric command networks, but execution remains localized. This design choice reflects long-standing Mechanicus distrust of independent machine cognition, particularly in platforms equipped with heavy weaponry. By anchoring decision-making within a human mind, the Ironstrider adheres to doctrinal safeguards while still achieving exceptional responsiveness. The purpose of the Ironstrider Ballistarius is tightly defined within Mechanicus and Administratum doctrine. It is not intended to hold ground, conduct reconnaissance in isolation, or participate in sustained attritional engagements. Instead, its primary role is mobile fire support, providing rapid, precise engagement of high-value targets while maintaining constant positional flexibility. This role emerged from observed deficiencies in traditional Imperial armoured doctrine, particularly the vulnerability of slow-moving fire support units to asymmetric threats. Within Skitarii formations, Ironstriders are deployed to extend the effective reach of the force. Their speed allows them to establish firing positions ahead of main formations, engage enemy armour or fortifications, and then reposition before counterfire can be organised. Administratum After Action reports frequently describe Ironstriders as force multipliers, amplifying the effectiveness of surrounding units by removing priority threats early in the engagement. Their elevated weapon mounts and long-range capabilities also allow them to engage targets obscured from line of sight of infantry-based heavy weapons. The Ironstrider's purpose also includes disruption of enemy maneuvering. By rapidly shifting firing positions, Ironstriders create uncertainty in enemy targeting solutions, forcing adversaries to commit resources to tracking a threat that is rarely stationary. This psychological effect is noted in several cross-faction analyses, though Imperial doctrine avoids framing it in such terms. Instead, reports emphasize measurable outcomes, such as delayed enemy advances, misallocated counter-battery fire, and increased survivability of slower Imperial units. Strategically, the Ironstrider supports the broader Mechanicus objective of delta dominance. Its integrated sensor arrays and constant battlefield movement allow it to collect and relay environmental and combat data across wide areas. This information feeds into noospheric networks, improving targeting accuracy and situational awareness for other units. In several documented engagements, Ironstriders continue to provide valuable data even after withdrawing from direct combat, underscoring their utility beyond weapon discharge alone. The concept of a final fate for the Ironstrider Ballistarius must be understood differently than for individual warriors or even conventional vehicles. The Imperium does not track Ironstriders as singular historical entities with defined endpoints, but as pattern-based assets subject to continual loss and replacement. Nevertheless, records do exist that describe the end states of individual units, providing insight into how the Imperium conceptualizes their life cycle. On the battlefield, the most common terminal outcome for an Ironstrider is catastrophic structural failure, following sustained enemy fire or extreme environmental conditions. Due to its reliance on speed rather than armour, an Ironstrider that becomes immobilized is unlikely to survive prolonged engagement. Administratum casualty reports indicate that once leg assemblies are compromised, recovery rates drop sharply. In such cases, pilots are often terminated either by neural feedback resulting from system collapse or through deliberate scuttling procedures initiated by Mechanicus protocols. Scuttling is a standardized response when recovery is deemed impossible. Ironstriders are equipped with internal destruct mechanisms designed to render critical systems irrecoverable. These systems prioritize destruction of the power unit and neural interface, preventing enemy analysis or repurposing. Mechanicus doctrine frames this not as loss, but as containment, preserving the sanctity of Archeotech designs. Administratum records classify such incidents as total asset denial rather than battlefield defeat. In cases where an Ironstrider is disabled but recoverable, Mechanicus recovery units are dispatched with high priority. Salvage operations focus first on extraction of the pilot's neural core, followed by stabilization of the power unit. Recovered chassis are either repaired or broken down for component reclamation, depending on damage severity. It is not uncommon for an Ironstrider's physical form to be rebuilt multiple times over its service life, with continuity preserved through retention of the original power unit and control architecture. The fate of the pilot is more complex. Pilots who survive catastrophic damage are rarely returned to non-interface service. Neurological assessments frequently determine that reintegration into standard Skitarii roles is impractical due to interface dependency. As a result, surviving pilots are often reassigned to similar platforms or retained within Mechanicus facilities for ongoing integration research. In some cases, pilots are permanently installed into fixed control nodes, their cognitive functions repurposed to support static defense systems or data processing arrays. There are also documented instances, though less common, where Ironstriders are withdrawn from frontline service not due to damage, but due to doctrinal re-evaluation. Forge World-specific tactical shifts sometimes render certain configurations redundant or inefficient. In these cases, Ironstriders may be relegated to secondary theatres, training environments, or planetary defence forces. Even in such roles, they retain their original configuration, as modification beyond approved parameters is doctrinally discouraged. The long-term fate of the Ironstrider Ballistarius as a pattern is one of continuity rather than obsolescence. Unlike many Imperial systems that are phased out or replaced, the Ironstrider persists largely unchanged. This persistence is not the result of ongoing improvement, but of the Mechanicus belief that the design represents an optimal expression of a recovered standard template construct. Alteration is viewed as unnecessary at best and heretical at worst. As long as the pattern continues to function within acceptable parameters, it remains in service. From an archival perspective, the Ironstrider's final fate is therefore cyclical. Individual units are lost, recovered, rebuilt, or destroyed while the pattern endures. Administratum projections do not include a planned retirement phase for the Ironstrider, nor do Mechanicus records suggest an intent to replace it with a fundamentally new design. Instead, the platform is expected to continue operating indefinitely, constrained only by the availability of Forge World resources and Skitarii pilots capable of sustaining the neural burden. In this sense, the Ironstrider Ballistarius does not possess a narrative conclusion. Its existence is defined by repetition, replication, and function. Pilots enter the machine, serve until termination or reassignment, and are replaced. Chassis are constructed, damaged, repaired, and destroyed. Through this process, the Ironstrider fulfills its purpose not as an individual relic, but as a persistent mechanism of war, endlessly reenacted across battlefields of the Imperium. Within the rigid logic of Imperial warfare, this outcome is not tragic nor triumphant, it is simply operational. The Ironstrider Ballistarius remains in motion, firing, repositioning, and transmitting data until it can no longer do so. When that moment arrives, it is dismantled, erased, or replaced without ceremony. What persists is not the machine itself, but the doctrine that produced it, and the ancient design principles that continue to shape its form. Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus impressions of the Ironstrider Ballistarius are shaped less by narrative significance and more by aggregation of data across prolonged operational use. Unlike singular relic engines or named war constructs, the Ironstrider appears in records as a repeating logistical constant, assessed through deployment frequency, maintenance burden, attrition rates, and battlefield return on resource investment. Both institutions approach the platform analytically, though their methodologies and priorities differ in emphasis. Administratum evaluations frame the Ironstrider Ballistarius primarily as a logistical asset within the broader structure of Imperial warfare. Early classification documents describe it as a high-mobility fire support walker, assigned to Skitarii cohorts attached to expeditionary and compliance forces. From a supply chain perspective, the Administratum identifies the Ironstrider as unusually efficient relative to its battlefield impact. Its lack of conventional fuel requirements significantly reduces dependency on Prometheum supply lines, a factor repeatedly highlighted in campaign summaries involving extended operations in resource-poor or hostile environments. Logistical manifests indicate that Ironstrider-equipped formations consume fewer transport allocations per operational cycle than equivalent armoured detachments. This reduction is attributed to several factors, including the absence of fuel tankers, lower ammunition tonnage for LAS-based configurations, and simplified spare part inventories. Administratum logisticians note that while individual components of the Ironstrider are complex, the overall number of replaceable parts is comparatively limited. This reduces warehousing strain and simplifies forward resupply planning, particularly in campaigns where supply routes are contested or unreliable. From an attrition standpoint, Administratum casualty analytics show a higher loss rate for Ironstriders compared to heavily armoured vehicles when measured purely by hull destruction. However, when adjusted for mission role and engagement exposure, the loss rate aligns closely with projected values. Importantly, Administratum analysts emphasise that Ironstrider losses often correlate with successful disruption or destruction of high-value enemy assets. In several campaign reviews, the destruction of Ironstriders is explicitly linked to delayed enemy advances, neutralised armoured threats, or preserved Imperial formations, reinforcing their perceived cost-effectiveness despite visible losses. Adeptus Mechanicus impressions are recorded in a markedly different format. Rather than focusing on supply efficiency or attrition ratios, Mechanicus documentation emphasises system stability, pattern fidelity, and machine spirit compliance. Internal Mechanicus reports consistently describe the Ironstrider Ballistarius as a stable Archeotech derivative, exhibiting predictable behaviour within accepted operational tolerances. This stability is considered noteworthy, given the incomplete nature of its recovered standard template construct origins. Forge World production logs indicate that Ironstrider construction timelines are shorter than those of heavier Walker platforms, though longer than simple tracked vehicles. This intermediate production complexity positions the Ironstrider as a scalable asset, capable of being fielded in meaningful numbers without monopolizing Forge World output. Mechanicus analytics highlight this balance as a key strength of the pattern, allowing widespread deployment without compromising production of more resource-intensive engines. Maintenance analytics compiled by the Mechanicus reveal that Ironstriders demonstrate consistent operational uptime when supported by properly trained tech priest cadres. Routine maintenance cycles focus heavily on leg articulation systems and neural interface stability, both of which are subject to continuous stress during operation. Failure rates in these systems are well documented, but also well understood, allowing predictive maintenance schedules to be implemented with high accuracy. As a result, catastrophic failures due to neglected maintenance are statistically rare in Mechanicus-controlled forces. The enigmatic power unit of the Ironstrider is addressed cautiously in Mechanicus impressions. Official records avoid speculative language, instead noting that the system exhibits stable output characteristics across prolonged operational periods. Energy variance measurements remain within narrow bands regardless of environmental conditions or sustained weapon discharge. This consistency is interpreted as confirmation of the system's sanctity rather than an anomaly requiring explanation. Mechanicus analytics treat the power unit as a fixed constant, excluding it from most maintenance and failure probability models. Administratum and Mechanicus assessments converge most clearly in the analysis of deployment efficiency. Both institutions record that Ironstriders are most effective when deployed in small, distributed numbers rather than concentrated formations. Administratum campaign planners note that dispersal reduces vulnerability to enemy artillery and airstrikes, while Mechanicus Tactica analyses emphasize improved data acquisition and targeting coverage. This convergence reinforces standardized deployment doctrines adopted across multiple Forge worlds and sector commands. Logistical findings further indicate that Ironstrider units impose unique personnel requirements. Administratum personnel rosters show that Ironstrider pilots require higher investment in training and augmentation compared to standard vehicle crews. This increases upfront personnel costs and reduces replacement speed in high casualty scenarios. However, these drawbacks are offset by lower crew counts per unit, as each Ironstrider requires only a single pilot rather than a multi-member crew. Over long campaigns, this results in net personnel efficiency gains, particularly in theatres where trained manpower is limited. Mechanicus personnel analytics place significant emphasis on pilot survivability and interface stability. Data suggests that pilot loss due to neural feedback or interface collapse is relatively uncommon when compared to catastrophic vehicle loss. Most pilot fatalities occur as a direct result of hull destruction rather than system malfunction. This is interpreted as evidence that the Ironstrider's neural integration protocols are mature and doctrinally sound, despite the inherent risks of deep interface systems. Supply chain analyses conducted by the Administratum frequently highlight the Ironstrider's reduced logistical footprint during redeployment phases. Ironstriders can be transported via standard heavy landers or mechanized transports without requiring specialized handling equipment. Their leg assemblies fold into secured transport configurations, allowing efficient use of cargo space. This adaptability simplifies strategic redeployment across war zones, reducing delays between theatres of operation. Adeptus Mechanicus records supplement these findings with data on field repair capability. Ironstriders can be partially serviced in forward operating zones, provided sufficient access to sanctified tools and trained personnel. Leg actuators, armor plating, and sensor arrays are all modular to varying degrees, allowing damaged components to be replaced without full chassis disassembly. This modularity is not framed as a design choice, but as a recovered feature of the original standard template construct pattern. Administratum analysts also examine Ironstrider performance in joint operations with other Imperial forces. Reports consistently note high compatibility with Skitarii formations and moderate compatibility with Astra Militarum units. Coordination challenges arise primarily from differences in communication protocols and operational tempo. Ironstriders often outpace Astra Militarum armoured units, creating gaps in formation coherence if not carefully managed. Administratum doctrine has adapted to this by assigning Ironstriders independent engagement zones, rather than embedding them directly within slower-moving units. Mechanicus Tactica documents view this independence positively. Ironstriders operating semi-autonomously generate continuous streams of battlefield data, feeding into broader noospheric networks. Analytics show that this data improves targeting accuracy and threat prioritization for nearby units, even those not directly linked to Mechanicus command structures. This reinforces the Mechanicus perception of the Ironstrider as both a combat platform and a mobile data node. Attrition modelling conducted jointly by the Administratum and Mechanicus provides further insight into long-term sustainability. Projections indicate that Ironstrider-equipped forces maintain combat effectiveness longer than equivalent formations, relying on heavier, slower platforms, particularly in fluid or rapidly changing battlefields. While individual Ironstriders may be lost at higher rates, Their impact on enemy forces and reduced logistical demands offset these losses over time. This modelling has influenced strategic planning at sector and segmentum levels, encouraging broader adoption of the platform. There are, however, points of institutional concern. Administratum auditors occasionally flag Ironstrider production and deployment as vulnerable to Forge World bottlenecks. Because construction authority remains tightly controlled by the Mechanicus, Administratum planners have limited ability to scale Ironstrider numbers independently. In periods of high demand, this has led to allocation disputes between Forge Worlds and sector commands. These disputes are documented diplomatically, with language emphasizing coordination challenges rather than conflict. Mechanicus responses to such concerns are characteristically restrained. Internal correspondence frames production limits as necessary safeguards to preserve pattern integrity and machine spirit harmony. Analytics suggest that overextension of production capacity correlates with increased maintenance anomalies, reinforcing the Mechanicus position that controlled output is preferable to rapid expansion. This philosophical divide remains unresolved but has not significantly impeded Ironstrider deployment to date. Another recurring analytical theme involves battlefield survivability trends. Administratum data shows that Ironstriders operating within well-supported Skitarii networks survive significantly longer than those deployed in isolation. This finding has informed revised deployment doctrines emphasizing mutual support, sensor overlap, and coordinated repositioning. Mechanicus Tactica texts echo this conclusion, framing it as evidence of correct doctrinal application rather than a limitation of the platform itself. The cumulative impression formed by both institutions is pragmatic. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is not viewed as exceptional in isolation, nor as irreplaceable. Instead, it is regarded as a reliable component within a broader system of war. Its strengths are measurable, its weaknesses understood, and its resource demands predictable. This predictability is highly valued within Imperial institutions, where uncertainty often translates into strategic risk. From a purely analytical standpoint, the Ironstrider's continued use is justified by data rather than reverence. Administratum summaries frequently conclude that the platform delivers consistent returns on investment across diverse theatres. Mechanicus assessments emphasize that it operates within acceptable doctrinal parameters without exhibiting signs of systemic degradation. Together, these findings support the Ironstrider's entrenched position within Imperial force structures. In the absence of innovation or replacement programs, the Ironstrider Ballistarius remains a fixed variable in Imperial logistics and planning. Its presence in deployment tables, supply manifests, and performance reports reflects an institutional consensus grounded in numbers rather than belief. While its deeper technological nature remains opaque, its practical value is repeatedly affirmed through analysis and experience. Thus, within the combined archives of the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus, the Ironstrider Ballistarius exists not as a mystery to be solved, but as a known quantity to be managed. Its impressions are statistical, its significance logistical, and its legacy defined by sustained utility rather than singular achievement. Recorded appearances of the Ironstrider Ballistarius in notable wars and engagements are dispersed across multiple sector archives rather than concentrated around a single defining campaign. This distribution reflects the platform's doctrinal role as a repeatable, scalable asset rather than a centerpiece of strategic offensives. Adeptus Administratum battle logs and Adeptus Mechanicus conflict registers reference Ironstriders most frequently in mid-scale and large-scale engagements where maneuver warfare and rapid threat neutralization were prioritized over static defense. One of the earliest widely cited deployments occurred during late Great Crusade-era compliance actions, though documentation from this period remains fragmentary. Several Mechanicus redacted records reference fast-moving walker constructs operating alongside Skitarii detachments during the pacification of technologically regressive human enclaves. These records emphasize the Ironstrider's ability to outmaneuver locally produced armoured vehicles and neutralize fortified positions without requiring prolonged siege operations. While specific planetary names are often omitted or encoded, the pattern of engagement is consistent: rapid advance, long-range precision fire, and immediate redeployment once resistance collapsed. More comprehensive records emerge from conflicts in the early centuries of the 41st millennium, particularly during campaigns against renegade planetary defense forces and lightly mechanized Xenos adversaries. Administratum war diaries from several segmentum-level operations describe Ironstriders operating ahead of main Imperial advances, engaging enemy armor columns before they could establish firing lines. In these engagements, Ironstriders rarely acted in isolation. They were typically deployed in pairs or small groups, maintaining spacing sufficient to avoid massed counterfire while overlapping fields of observation. A frequently cited campaign involves the suppression of a secessionist forge world whose ruling council had severed tithes and repurposed industrial assets for autonomous defense. Mechanicus records from this operation highlight Ironstriders as key assets in countering automated defense platforms and mobile artillery units. Their speed allowed them to exploit gaps in defensive grids, while their long-range weaponry enabled them to destroy power relays and command nodes without committing heavier assets. Battle damage assessments indicate that Ironstriders sustained moderate losses, primarily due to concentrated anti-walker fire, but their actions significantly reduced the duration and cost of the campaign. In conflicts against Orc warbands, Ironstrider deployments are documented as more situational. Administratum analyses note that Orc forces often favour massed, aggressive advances supported by crude but resilient vehicles. Ironstriders engaged these forces by targeting key vehicles and leadership elements, rather than attempting to thin massed infantry formations. Battle reports describe Ironstriders executing repeated hit and withdraw cycles, firing into advancing Orc columns before rapidly repositioning to avoid return fire. This approach proved effective in disrupting Orc momentum, forcing warbands to fragment or redirect their advances. Mechanicus after-action reviews from these engagements emphasize the importance of terrain selection. Ironstriders performed optimally in open or semi-open environments, where their speed could be fully utilized. In dense urban zones or heavily forested areas, their effectiveness was reduced, though not negated. In such environments, Ironstriders often shifted roles, providing overwatch from elevated positions or acting as mobile reserve units rather than frontline elements. Administratum commanders adapted deployment patterns accordingly, assigning Ironstriders to zones where maneuver space could be preserved. Encounters with Traitor Guard and Renegade Mechanicus forces provide additional insight into Ironstrider fighting style. In these engagements, Ironstriders frequently faced opponents equipped with comparable levels of technological sophistication. Administratum battle logs describe Ironstriders engaging enemy walkers and light-armoured vehicles in extended long-range duels, leveraging superior mobility to control engagement distance. Mechanics analytics note that Ironstriders demonstrated high survivability when operating within integrated noospheric networks, coordinating movements and target selection to overwhelm isolated enemy units. One notable engagement involved a prolonged running battle across an industrial wasteland, where Ironstriders repeatedly clashed with enemy light walkers and artillery units. Administratum records describe the engagement as highly dynamic, with Ironstriders repositioning dozens of times over the course of a single-day cycle. Despite sustained exposure to enemy fire, the Ironstriders maintained operational tempo, attriting enemy forces through cumulative damage rather than decisive breakthroughs. The engagement concluded with enemy withdrawal, attributed in part to the inability to fix Ironstrider positions long enough to deploy effective countermeasures. Fighting style analyses compiled by the Adeptus Administratum identify several consistent behavioral patterns across recorded engagements. Ironstriders rarely advance directly toward enemy concentrations. Instead, they favour oblique approaches that maximize lateral movement and complicate enemy targeting. Fire is typically delivered in controlled bursts or single precision shots, rather than sustained barrages. This reflects both the weapon systems employed and the emphasis on ammunition and thermal efficiency. Mechanicus Tactica texts describe the Ironstrider's fighting style as kinetic dominance through motion. Rather than overwhelming the enemy through sheer firepower, Ironstriders exploit speed to dictate the rhythm of engagement. By constantly altering position, they force adversaries to react rather than initiate. This reactive posture often leads to misallocated enemy fire and delayed responses, creating openings for other Imperial units to exploit. Battle details from recorded engagements highlight the importance of coordination between Ironstriders and supporting forces. Administratum reports frequently note that Ironstriders achieve their highest effectiveness when operating in concert with Skitarii infantry and other mobile assets. Skitarii units provide screening against close assault threats and designate targets through shared data networks. In return, Ironstriders neutralize threats that would otherwise stall infantry advances, such as entrenched heavy weapons or enemy armor. In several documented battles against Eldar forces, Ironstrider performance is described as mixed but instructive. Eldar units matched or exceeded Ironstriders in speed and maneuverability, reducing the Ironstrider's usual advantage. Administratum analyses note that Ironstriders adapted by focusing on area denial rather than direct pursuit, using long-range fire to restrict enemy movement corridors. While Ironstrider losses were higher in these engagements, their presence still contributed to containment and delay operations, buying time for heavier Imperial forces to reposition. Encounters with Necron forces are less frequently documented but carry distinctive characteristics. Administratum battle logs describe Ironstriders engaging Necron constructs at extreme ranges, exploiting moments of exposure during enemy teleportation or reanimation cycles. Mechanicus records emphasize that Ironstriders avoided prolonged engagements with heavily armored Necron units, instead targeting support constructs and command elements. Losses in these engagements were significant, but Ironstriders were credited with disrupting enemy formations and delaying advances. Throughout these wars and battles, casualty and damage patterns reinforce the Ironstrider's operational profile. Administratum statistics show that Ironstriders are most often lost to concentrated heavy weapon fire, or environmental hazards rather than attritional damage. Mines, ambushes, and sudden terrain collapses account for a disproportionate number of losses in certain campaigns. As a result, later deployment doctrines place increased emphasis on reconnaissance and environmental scanning prior to Ironstrider movement. Mechanicus battle analyses also note adaptation over time. Early deployment sometimes underestimated the strain placed on leg assemblies during sustained high-speed operations. Subsequent engagements show evidence of improved pacing, with Ironstriders alternating between rapid movement and brief stabilization periods to reduce mechanical stress. These adjustments correlate with lower rates of non-combat mechanical failure in later records. Another recurring battle detail involves Ironstrider engagement ranges. Administratum reports consistently highlight that Ironstriders engage at ranges beyond those of standard infantry and many vehicle-mounted weapons. This standoff capability allows them to operate with relative impunity against poorly equipped foes. Against technologically advanced enemies, this advantage is less pronounced but still relevant, particularly when combined with constant repositioning. In siege contexts, Ironstriders are recorded as auxiliary assets rather than primary assault units. Administratum war diaries describe Ironstriders conducting perimeter sweeps, counter-battery missions, and rapid response engagements against breakout attempts. Their ability to traverse large sections of siege lines quickly made them valuable for plugging temporary gaps or responding to unexpected threats. Mechanicus Tactica texts emphasize that Ironstriders were never intended to breach fortifications directly, and deployments that attempted such use resulted in avoidable losses. The cumulative battle record also includes engagements where Ironstriders were withdrawn prematurely due to unfavorable conditions. Administratum reports note several instances where dense urban terrain, severe electromagnetic interference, or extreme weather reduced Ironstrider effectiveness. In these cases, commanders opted to redeploy Ironstriders to secondary theatres rather than risk attrition without commensurate gains. These decisions are documented as evidence of doctrinal maturity rather than failure. Across all recorded wars and battles, one consistent theme emerges in Administratum and Mechanicus documentation. Ironstriders are most effective when their fighting style is respected and preserved. When used as intended, they deliver disproportionate impact relative to their numbers. When misused, particularly as substitutes for heavier armour or static defence, their losses increase sharply without corresponding strategic benefit. By aggregating these battle records, both institutions have refined their understanding of Ironstrider employment. Fighting style is no longer treated as an abstract doctrinal concept, but as a data-validated pattern reinforced through repeated engagements. Ironstriders move, fire, and reposition in a continuous cycle, shaping the battlefield through presence rather than occupation. Thus, within the recorded wars and battles of the Imperium, the Ironstrider Ballistarius does not stand out as a singular hero or decisive instrument. Instead, it appears as a recurring tactical constant, influencing outcomes incrementally through speed, precision, and disruption. Its battle history is not defined by dramatic victories, but by sustained contribution across countless engagements, each recorded in the methodical language of Administratum logs and Mechanicus analytics. Additional wars and battle records involving the Ironstrider Ballistarius further reinforce the platform's role as a persistent operational element rather than an exceptional anomaly. These later records, often compiled as appendices or marginal analyses within larger campaign archives, provide insight into how Ironstriders perform across prolonged conflicts, post-engagement conditions, and extended occupation phases. They also reveal how both the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus interpret outcomes after hostilities have formally concluded. Several prolonged border wars in the latter centuries of the 41st millennium provide useful longitudinal data. In these conflicts, Ironstriders were not deployed for singular decisive actions, but rotated continuously through patrol, interdiction, and rapid response roles over standard years. Administratum operational summaries describe Ironstriders maintaining territorial control across vast, sparsely populated regions where static defences were impractical. Their speed allowed them to respond to incursions before enemy forces could consolidate, while their long-range firepower discouraged the establishment of fortified positions. In one such campaign against nomadic Xenos raiders, Ironstriders were assigned to mobile exclusion zones spanning hundreds of kilometres. Administratum records note that while direct engagements were infrequent, the mere presence of Ironstriders altered enemy behaviour. Raiders shifted routes, reduced attack frequency, or avoided contested regions entirely. From an analytical standpoint, these outcomes were categorized as strategic denial rather than battlefield victory. Ironstrider losses during this campaign were minimal, primarily attributed to environmental hazards rather than enemy action. Additional records from counterinsurgency operations on industrial worlds reveal a different application. In these environments, Ironstriders were deployed to suppress mobile insurgent armour and provide rapid overwatch during mechanized sweeps. Administratum reports indicate that Ironstriders excelled at isolating insurgent units, attempting to disengage, engaging them at range before they could disperse into urban cover. Mechanicus records note increased maintenance demands in these campaigns due to particulate contamination and infrastructure debris, but no significant deviations from expected operational parameters. Conflicts involving Tyranid splinter fleets provide another layer of data. Administratum battle records describe Ironstriders engaging Tyranid bioforms during the early stages of planetary defense, targeting synapse creatures and larger organisms at extended ranges. Ironstriders were rarely committed once Tyranid forces reached saturation levels, at which point speed and maneuver space diminished rapidly. Losses in these engagements were high relative to other theatres, but Administratum analysts note that Ironstrider actions during initial contact phases delayed Tyranid advances and improved evacuation and redeployment timelines. Mechanicus after-action analyses from these engagements focus on machine survivability and data integrity, rather than casualty figures. Records emphasize that Ironstriders operating within intact noospheric networks provided valuable biological and tactical data before destruction or withdrawal. This data was later incorporated into revised threat models, improving Imperial responses in subsequent Tyranid encounters. In this context, Ironstrider losses were framed as data acquisition costs rather than material failures. Another set of records concerns long-duration crusades, where Ironstriders were deployed continuously across multiple war zones. Administratum logistics summaries from these campaigns highlight the platform's endurance and adaptability. Ironstriders were redeployed repeatedly with minimal refit, often transitioning directly from one theatre to another. Attrition rates varied widely depending on deployment context, but overall availability remained within projected tolerances. This consistency contributed to favourable assessments of Ironstrider sustainability under prolonged operational strain. Aftermath documentation provides insight into how Ironstrider deployments influence post-conflict conditions. Administratum Occupation reports note that Ironstriders often remained active during stabilisation phases, patrolling former combat zones and responding to residual threats. Their mobility allowed them to cover large areas with relatively few assets, reducing the need for permanent garrisons. In several cases, Ironstriders were credited with preventing the re-emergence of hostile forces by disrupting early attempts at reorganisation. Mechanicus records from post-conflict periods emphasise inspection and reclamation activities. Ironstriders returning from prolonged campaigns undergo detailed diagnostic rites, focusing on leg articulation wear, neural interface integrity, and power unit stability. Analytics indicate that Ironstriders exposed to continuous high-speed operations show predictable patterns of stress accumulation, which can be mitigated through standardized refit procedures. These findings reinforce the perception of the Ironstrider as a mechanically predictable system despite its Archeotech origins. In instances where Ironstriders were abandoned or destroyed during campaigns, Aftermath records document deliberate recovery or denial operations. Administratum summaries often reference Mechanicus directives, prioritizing retrieval of wreckage even after hostilities had ceased. Salvage teams were dispatched to recover power units and neural cores, sometimes months after initial losses. These efforts are framed not as attempts to restore individual assets, but as measures to preserve pattern continuity and prevent enemy exploitation. The aftermath of conflicts against technologically advanced adversaries reveals more complex outcomes. Administratum reports from wars involving traitor Mechanicus or heretical Forge worlds describe instances where Ironstrider wreckage became focal points of post-battle operations. Enemy forces reportedly attempted to capture or analyze Ironstrider remains, prompting aggressive denial actions. Mechanicus correspondence from these events emphasizes heightened concern regarding unauthorized access to Archeotech-derived systems, reinforcing existing prohibitions on battlefield abandonment. Final analyses compiled jointly by the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus synthesize these additional records into broader assessments of Ironstrider utility. From the Administratum perspective, the Ironstrider Ballistarius is categorized as a reliable force multiplier, with a clearly defined operational envelope. Its effectiveness is highest in fluid battlefields, where mobility and rapid engagement outweigh the need for sustained defensive presence. Administratum analysts caution against doctrinal drift, noting that misuse of Ironstriders outside their intended role correlates strongly with disproportionate losses. Administratum strategic reviews also highlight the Ironstrider's indirect benefits. These include reduced strain on supply lines, increased operational tempo for Skitarii forces, and improved responsiveness to emerging threats. While Ironstriders do not decisively alter campaign outcomes on their own, they consistently improve Imperial force efficiency. This contribution, though incremental, is valued highly within Administratum planning frameworks that prioritize predictability and scalability. From the Adeptus Mechanicus perspective, final analysis centers on pattern integrity and long-term viability. Mechanicus conclave summaries describe the Ironstrider Ballistarius as a stable manifestation of recovered standard template construct design principles. Despite incomplete understanding of its power system, the platform exhibits no signs of progressive degradation across centuries of use. This stability is interpreted as validation of both the original design and the Mechanicus custodial role. Mechanicus' final assessments also emphasize doctrinal alignment. The Ironstrider's reliance on human pilot integration satisfies long-standing safeguards against autonomous machine cognition. Its modular maintenance profile supports distributed deployment without compromising ritual compliance. These factors collectively position the Ironstrider as an acceptable balance between ancient capability and contemporary oversight. There is, however, acknowledgement of unresolved concerns. Mechanicus records note that the Ironstrider's power system remains fundamentally opaque, limiting deeper optimization or adaptation. While this has not impeded operational use, it constrains future development. Administratum analysts echo this limitation from a strategic perspective, noting that reliance on an incompletely understood system introduces long-term uncertainty. Nevertheless, both institutions accept this risk as inherent to much of Imperial technology. In synthesizing aftermath data and extended battle records, a shared conclusion emerges. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is neither transformative nor obsolete. It occupies a stable niche within Imperial warfare, shaped by data rather than tradition alone. Its continued deployment reflects institutional confidence, built through repeated validation rather than ideological attachment. Administratum final reports often conclude with pragmatic language, noting that Ironstrider-equipped forces demonstrate consistent performance across diverse theatres when employed correctly. Mechanicus' final communiques frame the same conclusion in doctrinal terms, asserting that the Ironstrider fulfills its ordained function without deviation. While their interpretations differ in tone, the outcome is identical: continued production, deployment, and maintenance without significant alteration. In the broader context of Imperial war-making, the Ironstrider Ballistarius serves as an example of how ancient designs persist through disciplined use rather than innovation. Its battle record does not feature singular turning points or legendary engagements. Instead, it is characterized by accumulation, repetition, and refinement. Each additional war adds data, each aftermath reinforces doctrine, and each analysis confirms existing assumptions. Thus, from the combined perspective of the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus, the Ironstrider Ballistarius concludes Chapter 2 not as a subject of debate, but as a resolved equation. Inputs are known, outputs are measured, and variables are controlled within acceptable margins. The machine continues to walk, fire, and reposition across the Imperium's battlefields, not because it is extraordinary, but because it is consistently sufficient. Inquisition impressions of the Ironstrider Ballistarius diverge markedly from those of the Adeptus Administratum and Adeptus Mechanicus, not in outward contradiction, but in focus and implication. Where other Imperial institutions evaluate the platform through metrics of efficiency and doctrinal compliance, the Inquisition approaches it as a point of latent risk. This perspective is shaped by mandate rather than opposition. The Inquisition is concerned less with how reliably the Ironstrider functions and more with what remains unknown about why it functions at all. Inquisition files referencing the Ironstrider Ballistarius are comparatively sparse and rarely centralized. Instead, observations are distributed across Ordo reports, marginal annotations attached to campaign reviews, and sealed addenda appended to Mechanicus compliance audits. These documents often begin with standard disclaimers asserting that no direct heretical deviation has been identified. However, the tone that follows is consistently cautious, reflecting unease with aspects of the platform that resist complete categorization within orthodox technological frameworks. One of the earliest Inquisition observations concerns the Ironstrider's power system. While Mechanicus records describe it as stable and sanctified, Inquisition analysts note that stability alone does not equate to transparency. Multiple Ordo investigations reference the same anomaly: the power unit's apparent independence from conventional resource inputs, and its resistance to invasive diagnostics. Unlike plasma reactors or promethium engines, which degrade predictably under stress. Ironstrider power output remains constant even in extreme conditions. Inquisition commentary describes this behavior as statistically improbable when compared against known Imperial technologies. Field observations compiled by Ordo Xenos and Ordo Hereticus operatives further complicate this picture. In several engagements against Xenos forces, Ironstriders reportedly continued operating in environments saturated with radiation, electromagnetic interference, or exotic energies that disrupted other Imperial systems. While Mechanicus logs attribute this resilience to robust design margins, Inquisition notes flag the pattern for review, citing parallels with recovered Archeotech whose origins predate the Imperium's accepted technological lineage. Another recurring observation involves temporal anomalies in battlefield recordings. Inquisition analysts reviewing pict feeds and Auspex logs from Ironstrider engagements have identified minor but consistent discrepancies between recorded timestamps and observed motion. These discrepancies are subtle, often amounting to fractions of a second, but they appear repeatedly across unrelated campaigns and Forge World deployments. Mechanicus explanations attribute the effect to sensor lag or data compression artifacts. Inquisition analysts do not reject this explanation outright, but note that the discrepancies tend to favour the Ironstrider's movement, making it appear marginally faster than recorded metrics should allow. These findings are classified not as evidence of temporal manipulation, but as unexplained variance. Inquisition doctrine emphasizes restraint in interpretation, particularly when dealing with Mechanicus assets. Nevertheless, sealed commentaries attached to these analyses recommend continued monitoring rather than dismissal. The language used is careful, emphasizing observation over accusation, but the implication is clear. The Ironstrider exhibits characteristics that do not fully align with established models of Imperial technology. Pilot-related observations form another area of Inquisition interest. While the Mechanicus documents neural integration as a controlled and doctrinally approved process, Inquisition case files include several reports of anomalous pilot behavior following prolonged Ironstrider deployment. These reports are rare and often buried within broader personnel assessments, but they share notable similarities. Pilots reassigned after extended service have been observed exhibiting heightened spatial awareness, delayed reaction to non-combat stimuli, and difficulty disengaging from predictive motion behaviors. In one sealed Ordo Hereticus report, a former Ironstrider pilot assigned to a static defense role reportedly attempted to anticipate threats that had not yet materialized, repositioning defensive assets without explicit orders. While this behavior improved defensive readiness, it raised concerns about residual machine influence on cognitive processes. The report concludes that no evidence of possession or external manipulation was present, but recommends that long-term Ironstrider pilots not be reassigned to roles involving independent command authority. Inquisition observers are particularly attentive to the Ironstrider's apparent responsiveness to pilot intent. Administratum and Mechanicus records celebrate this trait as a mark of efficiency. Inquisition commentary frames it differently, questioning whether the boundary between pilot cognition and machine execution is always clearly defined. Some sealed analyses suggest that the Ironstrider's control architecture may include predictive systems that anticipate pilot intent rather than merely responding to it. If true, this would place the platform closer to autonomous cognition than doctrinally acknowledged. No direct evidence supports this conclusion, and Inquisition reports explicitly state that no self-initiating behavior has been recorded. However, the absence of evidence is not treated as resolution. Instead, these observations are catalogued as areas of concern requiring continued oversight. The Ironstrider's strict prohibition against deep system interrogation further complicates verification, limiting the Inquisition's ability to independently confirm Mechanicus assurances. Battlefield observations also feature prominently in Inquisition assessments. In several engagements reviewed by Ordo Xenos analysts, Ironstriders were observed altering movement patterns in response to Xenos tactics in ways not reflected in command directives. Administratum reports interpret these actions as pilot initiative supported by data feedback. Inquisition notes acknowledge this explanation, but emphasize that similar adaptive behavior has been observed in certain Xenes constructs, particularly those employing distributed cognition. This comparison is presented cautiously, with explicit disclaimers against drawing equivalence, yet the juxtaposition is deliberate. One unexplainable finding referenced in multiple Inquisition documents involves Ironstriders operating beyond expected endurance thresholds without observable degradation. In campaigns where Skitarii forces experienced systemic fatigue and maintenance backlogs, Ironstriders continued functioning with minimal performance loss. Mechanicus explanations cite the sanctity and resilience of the power unit. Inquisition analysts counter that even sanctified systems typically exhibit measurable wear. The absence of such indicators is logged as anomalous, though not immediately threatening. Environmental interaction anomalies are also noted. In at least 2 documented cases, Ironstriders traversed terrain later identified as contaminated by warp-related phenomena. Other Imperial machines operating in the same zones experienced sensor corruption, erratic behavior, or catastrophic failure. Ironstriders reportedly exited these zones without incident, continuing to operate normally. Inquisition investigators caution that these reports are second-hand and lack sufficient corroboration. Nevertheless, they are included in sealed annexes due to their potential implications. The Inquisition's most guarded observations concern the Ironstrider's Archeotech origins. While the Mechanicus frames the platform as a recovered standard template construct derivative, Inquisition historians note that no complete standard template construct record exists that fully accounts for the Ironstrider's design, particularly its power system. This absence is not unusual in itself, but cross-referencing with pre-Imperial technological records yields no clear analogues. Some Ordo Malleus scholars have speculated in heavily redacted commentary that the design may incorporate elements from a technological tradition not fully aligned with known human development pathways. Such speculation is explicitly labelled as unconfirmed and remains confined to the most restricted Inquisition archives. No formal accusations or doctrinal challenges have been issued on this basis. Instead, these theories serve as context for continued scrutiny. The Inquisition's role is not to dismantle Mechanicus assets without cause, but to ensure that unresolved questions remain visible rather than forgotten. Inquisition impressions of the Ironstrider Ballistarius therefore exist in a state of suspension. The platform is not condemned, nor is it celebrated. It is monitored. Observations are accumulated slowly, cross-checked against unrelated incidents, and stored for future reference. The absence of overt corruption or heretical deviation is noted repeatedly, yet this absence does not equate to closure. Internal correspondence between Ordo representatives reflects a shared understanding that the Ironstrider occupies a grey zone within Imperial technology. It functions too reliably to provoke immediate intervention, yet contains too many unresolved elements to be ignored. The consensus position emphasizes patience and documentation over action. As one sealed memorandum phrases it, the Ironstrider does not demand judgment, only attention. From the Inquisition perspective, unexplainable findings are not failures of understanding but indicators of potential significance. The Ironstrider's continued operation across centuries without definitive clarification of its deepest mechanisms ensures its place within Inquisition archives. Each new campaign, each anomalous data point, adds to a growing body of observation that remains deliberately inconclusive. Thus, Chapter 3 begins not with accusation or revelation, but with measured uncertainty. The Ironstrider Ballistarius, as viewed through Inquisition records, is neither threat nor artifact of comfort. It is a functioning unknown, tolerated because it performs its role within Imperial warmaking, and watched because its existence challenges the assumption that all sanctioned technologies are fully accounted for. In this balance between utility and mystery, the Inquisition maintains its vigil. The Ironstrider continues to walk the battlefields of the Imperium, observed not only by allies and enemies, but by unseen auditors who record what cannot yet be explained and wait for patterns to emerge. Inquisition review of Ironstrider Ballistarius battlefield performance shifts noticeably in tone, when moving from general impressions to specific anomalies recorded during wars and engagements. Where earlier observations focus on theoretical risk and unexplained consistency, sealed operational reviews examine moments when the Ironstrider's behaviour deviated subtly but persistently from expected combat patterns. These deviations rarely resulted in failure. Instead, they often coincided with improbable survivability, unexpected tactical advantage, or outcomes that resisted clean explanation through doctrine alone. Anomalies recorded in wars involving Ironstrider units are not clustered around a single campaign or era. Instead, they appear sporadically across Millennia 41 and Millennia 42, across Forge worlds with no shared doctrinal lineage beyond baseline Mechanicus compliance. This distribution complicates efforts to attribute irregularities to localized modification, pilot culture, or Forge-specific rituals. Inquisition analysts repeatedly emphasize this dispersion, noting that consistency across unrelated deployments increases the significance of even minor deviations. One recurring anomaly involves Ironstrider response timing during large-scale engagements. In multiple recorded battles against both Xenos and Heretic forces, Ironstriders were observed repositioning fractions of a second before enemy maneuvers became apparent to broader Imperial formations. These movements were not dramatic flanking actions, but minor shifts in gait, firing angle, or line of advance. Administratum after action reports typically credit experienced pilots reacting quickly to battlefield cues. Inquisition cross-analysis, however, highlights that these reactions often preceded the availability of those cues within shared command data feeds. In one sealed report drawn from a protracted campaign against Eldari raiding forces, Ironstrider units repeatedly adjusted firing arcs moments before enemy skimmercraft broke cover. Auspex logs show no prior detection spikes sufficient to justify the timing. The report does not accuse the Ironstrider of precognitive function. Instead, it records the sequence as anomalous and flags it for pattern comparison with other engagements involving high-mobility enemies. Similar timing irregularities are later noted in battles against Drukhari forces and, more rarely, against Tyrannid vanguard organisms. Another anomaly category concerns damage tolerance exceeding projected thresholds. In numerous wars, Ironstriders remained operational after sustaining structural damage that should have compromised locomotion or targeting systems. Mechanicus records attribute this resilience to redundant systems and robust frame design. Inquisition analysts do not dispute the presence of redundancy, but point out cases where redundancy alone cannot explain continued precision fire or stable movement. During a siege engagement against renegade Astra Militarum formations, one Ironstrider reportedly continued effective combat operations after losing a primary stabilizing limb actuator. Picked feeds show altered gait mechanics that compensate dynamically rather than defaulting to degraded performance modes typical of Imperial walkers. This adaptive behavior was brief and situational, ceasing once the unit withdrew for maintenance. No lasting deviation was observed afterward. The event is logged as an isolated anomaly, yet its inclusion in sealed archives suggests unease with the underlying mechanism. Documented encounters with warp-influenced battlefields generate additional concern. In wars fought near unstable warp phenomena, Imperial machines frequently display predictable malfunctions, ranging from sensor corruption to complete system failure. In contrast, Ironstriders operating in proximity to these phenomena often show reduced susceptibility. In one engagement against Chaos Space Marine forces, Ironstriders advanced through a zone later classified as warp-saturated, without experiencing the distortions recorded by nearby Skitarii platforms. Inquisition reports are careful to note that Ironstriders did not exhibit immunity. Minor sensor irregularities were recorded, but these resolved without ritual intervention. This resilience is contrasted with the performance of other Mechanicus constructs in the same engagement, several of which required extensive rites of purification afterward. The discrepancy is noted without explanation. analysts refrained from labeling it resistance or adaptation, instead categorizing it as anomalous tolerance pending further data. Encounters with Necron forces received particular attention within Inquisition archives. Necron technology is often characterized by its ability to disrupt or override Imperial machine systems. In several engagements, Ironstriders operated within Necron suppression fields with less degradation than expected. While they did not resist these fields entirely, their performance decline was slower and less severe compared to other Skitarii vehicles. Ordo Xenos analysts caution against drawing conclusions, but the pattern recurs across multiple battle zones. One sealed encounter report describes an Ironstrider engaging Necron constructs, while its targeting system intermittently desynchronized from command directives. Despite this, its fire remained accurate, adjusting to enemy movement with minimal correction lag. The report concludes that pilot input likely compensated for system disruption, yet notes that pilot reaction speed alone does not fully account for the precision observed under those conditions. Sealed reports also address incidents of incomplete data capture. In several wars, Auspex and picked feed recordings from Ironstrider units terminate abruptly without corresponding loss of the unit. In most cases, the Ironstrider reappears later in the engagement or in post-battle musters, with no recorded explanation for the data gap. Mechanicus logs attribute these gaps to transmission interference or battlefield damage. Inquisition analysts accept this explanation provisionally, but note that the frequency of such gaps is higher for Ironstriders than for comparable platforms. One particularly scrutinized sealed report involves a counterinsurgency operation on a Forge-adjacent industrial world. Ironstriders deployed to suppress fortified rebel positions reportedly entered a sector blanketed by signal-dampening fields. Command telemetry was lost for several minutes. When communication resumed, the Ironstriders had neutralized all hostile positions with minimal ammunition expenditure. No internal recordings from the units were recoverable for the missing interval. The outcome was tactically favorable, yet the absence of data prompted Inquisition inquiry. Anomalies in pilot survivability are also documented. In wars with high attrition rates among Skitarii forces, Ironstrider pilots demonstrate statistically higher survival rates than expected. This trend persists even when controlling for deployment conditions and support availability. Inquisition analysts do not suggest deliberate preservation mechanisms, but they question whether the Ironstrider's control systems prioritize pilot protection beyond doctrinal norms. In one sealed Order Hereticus report, a pilot survived catastrophic destruction of an Ironstrider chassis, under circumstances where similar platforms resulted in total loss of operator. The pilot was recovered with minimal injuries and exhibited disorientation consistent with neural feedback shock rather than physical trauma. Post-engagement analysis could not determine how the pilot disengaged from the control system rapidly enough to survive. The event remains unexplained. Sealed reports further examine Ironstrider behavior during command breakdown scenarios. In engagements where command structures collapsed due to enemy action, Ironstriders often continued operating cohesively with nearby Skitarii units despite the absence of updated orders. Administratum reports frame this as doctrinal adherence and discipline training. Inquisition commentary notes that this cohesion occasionally extended beyond expected limits, with Ironstriders repositioning to support units outside their assigned operational scope. These actions improved battlefield outcomes but complicate assessments of autonomy. Inquisition doctrine does not prohibit initiative, but it draws a clear distinction between initiative and unsanctioned independent judgment. The report stops short of asserting the latter, yet repeatedly emphasize that Ironstrider behavior skirts the boundary between the two. The most sensitive sealed documents address cumulative pattern analysis. When anomalies are viewed individually, each can be explained through conventional means. When aggregated, they form a profile of behavior that is statistically distinct from other Mechanicus platforms. Inquisition analysts describe this profile as one of adaptive persistence, characterized by resilience, responsiveness, and consistency under conditions that degrade other Imperial systems. These findings are not presented as accusations. Instead, they are framed as indicators warranting continued observation. Sealed memoranda stress that the Ironstrider Ballistarius has not violated Imperial law, doctrinal prohibition, or Mechanicus sanction. It has not displayed self-direction, heretical output, or overt cognitive independence. The concern lies not in what the Ironstrider has done, but in how often it performs at the edge of expected parameters. As Chapter 3 progresses, the Inquisition record becomes increasingly methodical. Wars and battles are catalogued not for glory or loss, but for deviation. Each sealed report adds another data point to a growing archive that resists final interpretation. The Ironstrider Ballistarius emerges not as a singular anomaly, but as a consistent presence at the margins of Imperial technological understanding. In these records, uncertainty is preserved deliberately. The Inquisition does not seek immediate resolution. Instead, it builds a case defined by patience, comparison, and restraint. The Ironstrider continues to fight the enemies of the Imperium, and the Inquisition continues to watch, recording anomalies not as threats, but as questions that have yet to demand answers. Classified Inquisition files concerning the Ironstrider Ballistarius represent the most restricted layer of Imperial scrutiny applied to the platform. These documents are not numerous, but their existence alone distinguishes the Ironstrider from the majority of sanctioned Mechanicus war machines. Where earlier records focus on observation and anomaly cataloguing, classified files attempt to contextualize those anomalies within broader historical, technological, and doctrinal frameworks. They do not deliver verdicts. Instead, they preserve uncertainty in a structured and deliberate manner. Access to these files is typically limited to Senior Ordo Hereticus and Ordo Xenos officials, with select cross-references available to Ordo Malleus analysts under tightly controlled conditions. Each file opens with reaffirmation of the Ironstrider Ballistarius' continued authorization for Imperial service. This affirmation is repeated so frequently that it functions as a stabilizing refrain, reminding the reader that scrutiny does not imply condemnation. The Ironstrider is not under censure, it is under watch. One category of classified documentation focuses on origin opacity. While the Adeptus Mechanicus maintains that the Ironstrider derives from recovered standard template construct patterns, Inquisition historians note that its developmental lineage remains unusually fragmented. Unlike many Archeotech recoveries, which can be traced through partial schematics, expedition logs, or cross-referenced derivatives, the Ironstrider appears in the historical record already mature, functional, and doctrinally sealed. Classified analyses highlight this abrupt emergence as noteworthy. There is no documented period of a large-scale field testing, no gradual evolution of pattern variants, and no recorded failures that would normally accompany the reintroduction of ancient technology. The Ironstrider does not appear as a prototype refined over time. It appears as a finished solution. Inquisition commentary refrains from speculation on intent, but records the absence of developmental noise as statistically uncommon within Mechanicus innovation cycles. Another sealed file grouping addresses long-term performance consistency. Aggregated data across millennia shows that Ironstrider Ballistarius units display minimal variance in operational effectiveness, regardless of forge world, campaign environment, or opposing force. This uniformity is not absolute, but it is tighter than that observed in most Imperial platforms, which typically exhibit performance drift due to localized doctrinal interpretation or material substitution. Inquisition analysts describe this consistency as pattern-locked. The term is not used doctrinally, but analytically, to denote systems whose behavior resists divergence, even under diverse conditions. The implication is not that the Ironstrider adapts autonomously, but that its tolerances and responses are constrained within an unusually narrow band. This raises questions about design philosophy rather than function. Why such precision persists remains unanswered. Classified reports also revisit the subject of autonomy, but with greater care than earlier observational records. These files explicitly reject claims of independent cognition, artificial intelligence, or machine spirit deviation. No evidence supports such conclusions, and the Inquisition is careful to state this repeatedly. However, the files introduce the concept of anticipatory logic as a possible explanatory layer. Anticipatory logic is defined in these documents as a system architecture capable of projecting near-term outcomes based on continuous data intake, without initiating action independently of user input. Such systems are not prohibited under Imperial law, but their implementation at scale is rare due to doctrinal caution. Classified commentary suggests that the Ironstrider's responsiveness may stem from such an architecture, embedded deeply enough that it appears seamless to the pilot. If this interpretation is correct, the Ironstrider occupies a liminal category. It is neither reactive in the traditional sense, nor autonomous in the prohibited sense. It exists in a design space that is technically permissible, but philosophically uncomfortable. The files stop short of endorsing this theory, labeling it as one of several competing explanations. Another cluster of classified material concerns pilot interaction over extended service periods. While earlier reports note behavioral after-effects, classified analyses attempt to correlate these effects with deployment length, neural interface exposure, and environmental stressors. The findings remain inconclusive. No causal mechanism is identified. However, the persistence of subtle cognitive shifts across unrelated pilots strengthens the case that the Ironstrider's interface exerts influence beyond immediate control execution. Importantly, these files emphasize that the influence is not coercive. Pilots do not report intrusive thoughts, external impulses, or loss of agency. Instead, the changes manifest as altered perception of space, motion, and threat probability. Classified assessments describe this as alignment rather than domination, suggesting that the Ironstrider trains its pilots as much as it is controlled by them. This framing carries implications that the Inquisition does not explore fully within these documents. Instead, it records the phenomenon and restricts pilot reassignment patterns accordingly. Long-term Ironstrider pilots are more likely to be retained within similar operational roles, minimizing cognitive dissonance and reducing risk of doctrinal deviation elsewhere. The most sensitive classified files concern correlation analysis between Ironstrider anomalies and broader Imperial events. In a small number of cases, Ironstrider deployments coincide with unusually decisive campaign outcomes disproportionate to their numerical presence. These outcomes cannot be attributed solely to the platform, yet analysts note that Ironstriders often occupy pivotal moments within these engagements. The files do not suggest manipulation or intent. They merely observe that Ironstriders tend to be present when battles hinge on speed, precision, and rapid exploitation of enemy weakness. Whether this reflects deployment doctrine, commander preference, or something intrinsic to the platform remains unresolved. The correlation is recorded, not interpreted. Classified correspondence between Inquisition officers reveals internal disagreement regarding the significance of these patterns. Some argue that continued observation without intervention reflects institutional complacency. Others counter that premature action risks destabilizing a proven military asset based on circumstantial evidence. The prevailing position favors restraint. The Ironstrider's value to the Imperium is tangible. The risks remain theoretical. Final thoughts within these classified files converge on a shared conclusion that is notable for its moderation. The Ironstrider Ballistarius is assessed not as a threat, but as an exception. It violates no explicit law, yet it challenges implicit assumptions about how Imperial technology should behave. It functions too cleanly, too consistently, and too effectively to be fully comfortable within the Imperium's culture of sanctioned inefficiency and ritualized decay. From the Inquisition perspective, this does not demand suppression. It demands memory. The Ironstrider is catalogued as an object lesson in the limits of understanding. It reminds the Imperium that sanctioned does not mean fully known, and that ancient technology can retain depths beyond current explanatory frameworks. The closing annotations of these files emphasize vigilance without paranoia. The Ironstrider is to be monitored through continued data collection, cross-campaign analysis, and restricted system audits conducted in cooperation with the Adeptus Mechanicus. No escalation protocols are attached. No contingency purges are authorized. The files conclude that action should only follow evidence, not discomfort. In its final classified assessment, the Inquisition frames the Ironstrider Ballistarius as a stable unknown. It is a machine that performs its duty faithfully, yet carries within it unanswered questions inherited from humanity's forgotten past. As long as it continues to serve without deviation, it remains an asset. As long as its mysteries persist without revelation, it remains an object of quiet study. Thus, the Inquisition closes its archive not with judgment, but with continuation. The Ironstrider Ballistarius walks onward through Imperial history, its records sealed, its service uninterrupted, and its deeper nature left deliberately unresolved.